They fired me 1 week before the biggest leadership conference of the year, the very event I had built, scripted, and held together for 8 straight years. Without me, their polished CEO would walk onto that stage blind, in front of thousands, with cameras rolling. He thought cutting me loose erased my worth. What he didn't know was that I had already wired the entire show with a failsafe that answered only to me. If you want to see how a company collapses in real time, stay with me. Before I continue my story, where are you watching from? Trust me, you'll want to hear how this unfolds. They fired me 1 week before the spotlight I had built for them. 1 week before the leadership conference that wasn't just another meeting but the crown jewel of their public image. The event where clients, investors, and press gathered in a ballroom with cameras rolling to hear polished promises about the future. For 8 years, I had been the one who held every string behind that stage. I chose the lighting cues, designed the pacing of the slides, timed the demos so that they dazzled instead of broke, and even ghost-wrote the words that made Richard Hale, our CEO, look like he was born to lead. Nobody noticed me. They only noticed the show. Richard convinced himself it was his charisma that made the conference sing. He believed people applauded him. They didn't. They applauded my work, the kind you never see, but always feel. When HR slid the envelope across the table with its rehearsed sympathy, all I heard was Richard's voice echoing in the background saying I was replaceable. Replaceable. As if you could fire the director of a play on opening night and still expect the curtain to rise. I didn't fight. I didn't beg. I walked out with my badge still warm around my neck, and I let them believe the show was theirs now. But inside, I knew something Richard never understood. You cannot erase the architect without erasing the stage itself. In one careless decision, he had given me more power than I ever had in the shadows. Because I was no longer just backstage. I was the unseen current running through every word, every image, every cue that would unfold in front of the world. And when the lights went up, so would the truth. For 8 years, I lived in the shadows of that company, pulling every string while someone else stood in the spotlight. I wasn't just an event coordinator. I was the architect of the narrative that convinced the world our leadership was visionary. Every year, I turned chaos into precision, stitching together presentations from half-baked drafts, hiding technical flaws under flawless timing, and rescuing panicked executives when their microphones cut out or their slides froze. I built an entire rhythm they relied on without ever realizing it was me who kept the music playing. Richard Hale strutted across the stage in polished suits, believing he commanded the room with his voice and his smile. He never saw the network of cues, the endless late nights, or the quiet panic I swallowed while making sure his speeches landed with applause. He thought he was the show. He was only the mask I held up. And while he shook hands with investors at gala dinners, I was in empty ballrooms at midnight checking that the projectors wouldn't overheat. While he delivered polished jokes at award ceremonies, I was rewriting his speeches 5 minutes before curtain call so he wouldn't sound hollow. The truth was simple. Richard could not function without the invisible scaffolding I had built around him. Yet, when it came to recognition, I was invisible. No headlines mentioned me. No applause ever turned in my direction. It was always his name, his charm, his performance. That was the contract I accepted year after year, that my labor would be hidden, that my loyalty would buy me security even if it never bought me credit. But loyalty is a leash, not a shield. And when Richard decided to fire me, it wasn't because I wasn't needed. It was because I was too dangerous to his image. He couldn't allow anyone to see that his empire rested on someone else's unseen hands. He thought by cutting me out, he had secured the spotlight for himself alone. What he didn't understand was that you can't rip the foundation from a stage and expect the show to go on. By firing me, Richard had signed his own collapse, and soon everyone would see it. I didn't design my revenge in anger. It was born years earlier out of self-preservation. After my second conference with the company, I realized how fragile my position really was. I carried the show, yet nobody outside the office even knew my name. If I vanished, everything I had built could be claimed by someone else, and Richard would still stand on stage pretending he authored every word. That thought stayed with me. So, quietly, I began weaving a safety net into the systems I controlled. Not hacking, not anything illegal, just layers of automation designed to answer to me, and me alone. The scripts that ran the slides, the timers that controlled lighting cues, even the files Richard depended on for his speeches, all of them had a hidden thread. I embedded conditional triggers, lines of code masked as routine functions, invisible beneath the polished surface. To anyone else, it looked like a normal sequence of conference files. But if I was ever officially removed, if my credentials were erased, the system would pivot. Instead of smooth transitions and glowing praise, the conference would turn on itself. It wouldn't explode all at once. That would be too obvious, too easy to dismiss. No, it would unravel piece by piece, like a set coming apart mid-play. A flicker in the slides here, a stalled demo there, then something worse, until the illusion Richard loved so much collapsed under its own weight. It wasn't meant for profit, and it wasn't meant to harm anyone but him. It was meant to make sure that if they ever tried to erase me, the erasure would write itself across the very stage they relied on. When HR walked me out with their polite smiles, they thought the story ended there. What they didn't know was that my fingerprints were still on every cue and every line of code waiting backstage. And in 1 week, when the spotlight hit Richard Hale, my trap would finally be triggered, and the same system that once made him shine would strip him bare in front of everyone watching. The morning of the conference, the ballroom buzzed with the kind of restless energy I knew better than anyone. Technicians hustled, cameras blinked red, investors mingled in crisp suits, and hundreds of employees filled the seats with forced smiles. It was a performance space disguised as a corporate gathering, and Richard Hale was the star about to step into a spotlight he believed was his by right. I wasn't there physically, but my presence lingered in every cable, every file, every cue buried in the system. Richard strutted out onto the stage as if he were addressing a nation instead of a rented ballroom. His voice rang smooth and confident as he delivered his opening line. At this company, leadership is about vision. The crowd leaned forward, waiting for the polished slides to light up the towering screen behind him. Instead, the first glitch appeared. The logo, normally pristine, fractured into pixels before resolving into a frozen frame. A small stir of confusion spread through the audience. Richard cleared his throat, brushed it off with a smirk, and gestured to continue. The second slide appeared, but it wasn't the sleek growth charts or bold mission statements he expected. It was an email. His email, complaining about the very clients seated in the front row. "They're needy. They'll take anything if we sound confident," it read. The room went still. Richard stumbled, tried to laugh it away, but the damage had already seeped into the air. He barked at the crew in the wings, but each frantic command only triggered the next sequence. A demo video queued up, but instead of showcasing innovation, the footage stuttered and replayed, failed product launches, glitches he had sworn to investors were never public. Murmurs swelled into whispers. Phones were raised. Journalists leaned forward, sensing blood. Richard's smile cracked. He tugged at his collar, voice tightening as he tried to plow through a speech that no longer matched what the audience saw. The teleprompter betrayed him next, freezing on a line he hadn't rehearsed himself, forcing him to stumble over words he barely understood. To everyone watching, it looked like incompetence. To me, it was the trap tightening. He pressed on, desperate, but the air in the ballroom had shifted. The applause he counted on would never come. Every eye was on him, waiting not for inspiration but for collapse. And collapse was exactly what they were about to witness. Richard's voice, once polished enough to charm investors and silence doubters, cracked under the weight of the spectacle unraveling behind him. He demanded the crew fix it, but every command only tightened the noose. The next slide exposed more than a glitch. It revealed leaked memos where he mocked employees as replaceable parts, words that landed like a slap across the entire audience. The whispers turned into audible gasps. Some executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others leaned forward, hungry for the next revelation. The system obeyed no one but me, and it peeled back his facade layer by layer. The product demo meant to seal future contracts sputtered and failed in front of the very clients it was designed to impress. Instead of sleek visuals, the screen filled with support tickets and customer complaints he had buried, each stamped with dates that proved his success stories were staged lies. Phones were recording now, their lenses capturing not the triumphant CEO, but a man unraveling in real time. Richard's hands shook, his charm gone, his authority dissolving under the relentless stream of truth. The audience was no longer under his spell, they were watching a downfall. I could almost hear the air shifting, the collective realization that the emperor on stage had no clothes. The illusion was gone, replaced by the raw spectacle of collapse. Richard had walked on stage to cement his legacy. Instead, he stood trapped in a theater of his own making, unable to stop the implosion that every camera was immortalizing. And I knew, in that moment, that the conference designed to glorify him had become his public execution, and all I had to do was let it play to the final act. The room was already boiling with tension when the screen flickered one last time. Richard, sweating through his tailored suit, tried to wave it off, but what appeared behind him silenced even the whispers. A timestamp glowed in stark letters, the exact day and hour he had ordered my termination. Beneath it, a single line appeared, clean and sharp, written to be unforgettable. Erase the architect, and the stage erases you. Gasps broke into scattered shouts, cameras flashing, the press scribbling furiously as Richard's face drained of color. He spun toward the crew, desperate to regain control, but the system shut down entirely, plunging the ballroom into sudden darkness. No exit music, no applause, just silence so heavy it crushed the air. That was the moment the show ended, not with triumph, but with the erasure of the man who thought he could erase me. When the lights cut out, I didn't need to be there to savor what followed. I had already left that company behind, the badge turned in, my name erased from their roster, but not from the memory of what unfolded. As the chaos spread in that ballroom, I walked calmly through the city, blending into the crowd like any other passerby. No one around me knew that a legacy was collapsing blocks away, that a man who had thrived on appearances was unraveling in front of investors, clients, and cameras. I didn't need applause or recognition. The power was in knowing that I had shifted the stage with nothing more than foresight and patience. Richard Hale's empire crumbled in front of thousands, and I carried only silence. Dignity doesn't need noise, it needs presence. And as I walked away, I knew the story would never belong to him again. In the days that followed, headlines captured Richard's downfall better than I ever could. Videos of the conference spread online, his arrogance replayed frame by frame, his collapse dissected by commentators who once praised him. I stayed quiet, because silence spoke louder than any defense. For 8 years I had been invisible, but my absence exposed the truth more clearly than my presence ever did. The lesson was simple. Erase the unseen architect, and the illusion crumbles. Power doesn't always stand under the spotlight. It lives in the hands of those who build it. And I had built everything. They thought erasing me would secure their stage, but all it did was expose how fragile their empire truly was. I was the architect in the shadows, the one who built the illusion they depended on. And when they cut me loose, the illusion collapsed in front of the world. Looking back, the lesson isn't just about revenge. It's about value, dignity, and the quiet power of those who work behind the scenes. For 8 years, I accepted invisibility, telling myself loyalty would eventually be rewarded. But loyalty without recognition is not security. It's a leash. Richard Hale believed he could fire me and keep the show running, but what he never understood was that the show itself was me. When he erased me, he erased his own foundation. Life is full of Richards, leaders who mistake performance for substance, bosses who see loyalty as weakness instead of strength. The truth is, most systems, companies, relationships, even friendships, are held together by people no one notices until they're gone. The conference was my breaking point, but in everyday life the collapse might look quieter. A team falling apart, a project failing, a friendship dissolving when the unseen architect walks away. The lesson for us all is simple. Don't wait for others to define your worth. Protect it. Own it. Speak up before someone convinces you that being invisible is the same as being safe. How to get started today. 1. Write down 3 ways you add unseen value at work or in life. 2. Share one of them with someone who matters. Don't let your contribution stay hidden. 3. Set one boundary where your loyalty has been taken for granted. Your value doesn't need permission to exist. It already does. Comment below if this story resonated with you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe for more stories about resilience, justice, and the quiet strength that changes everything.